Are governments acting fast enough to guarantee individual rights in the face of rapidly evolving artificial intelligence technologies, or do they need support from non-governmental organizations?
No, they're not moving fast enough. We've got to speed up our game, but we've got to do it very carefully based on solid research, know what we're doing, come up with regulatory models that work for a very complex, fast evolving context where we have to look at not just tech in general, but its application, its uses. And only on that basis then can we put in place the right regulatory frame. Civil society plays a critically important role. Civil society is the voice of rights holders, the voice of citizens, and we need that voice to be fed in to the discussions. Governments don't automatically know what the issues are, what the challenges are, where the problems are lying hidden. That's what we gather from civil society out there, incredibly well skilled, right across all of the sectors, and without them we won't get it right.
So what are some of the ways civil society can be involved in this?
It's a very good question. We have to make sure to maintain organised spaces where there can be exchanges of views with civil society, and they tell us that when they're consulted, often they're not listened to, and that they're asked for their views, but they aren't given enough time or opportunity to express those views, and that they don't often get the sense that they've been listened to. So be it in the tech world, the AI world, or any other, we have to invest far more in creating these spaces where they can express the view and it has a meaningful impact. And by the way, one group that's shouting very loud about this is young people. Young civil society feels particularly excluded in decisions that have massive implications for their future.
How would you define a human rights-based approach to technology in the first place?
Human rights has no value in and of itself. Human rights is just a set of tools to honour human dignity. And so the answer to your question is that technology and the regulation of technology will be human rights based when its goal is honouring human dignity in all its wonderful diversity, making sure that every single one of us is respected in these settings.
What, according to you, are the main points of contention in the debate between privacy advocates and AI developers?
There are many points of contention. The first is that they misunderstand each other because it's about so much more than privacy. It's often reduced just to being human rights is just an issue of privacy, but it's about every human right. Look at the way AI works in reality in our lives, and you see the extent to which everything about who we are is engaged. It's about our free speech, it's about our free movement, it's our association, it's our social welfare entitlements. When a tech app is making a decision about whether I get the social welfare or not. It's about my job. It's about my access to school, to housing. The list goes on. Even as we move into the next generation of technology, it's about human identity itself. The issue is going to arise of what does it take to be a human? At what point have we created artificially something equivalent to a human? We're not there yet, thank goodness. But my point is that it's every imaginable issue. And in engaging all of those issues, the biggest challenge right now is transparency. It is imperative that the industry open up and make clear what it's doing, the content of algorithms, the content of training materials, and that and they'll tell you that it's not possible in many cases. We challenge that. This black box has a lid. We need to prise open the lid. Now, we can have discussions about what transparency looks like in practice. I concede that. But nevertheless, we have to have those conversations. I'm afraid of a future within which we will not have achieved transparency for these extraordinary technologies, which have such huge implications for human well-being.
So what are the arguments on the side of people who are saying that it's hard to be transparent in this?
The arguments on their side are not convincing. I'm not a scientist. I'm a lawyer, but I refuse to concede I refuse to concede that this is magic. Technology is invented by people, controlled by people for purposes that they consider useful for people. So how come people cannot understand what's going on? Now, I am told that there's a dimension of certain types of AI that operate in such an opaque way that it's actually difficult even for the designer to understand quite why it worked. All we're saying is let's at least have the conversation with those people around these technologies and see to what extent we can draw out adequate information so that we can, for example, regulate in an appropriate way.
How can we make sure that AI tools do not discriminate against certain groups?
Well, the first place we have to say that AI tools are capable of astonishing levels of discrimination. We can attempt to remove inappropriate by the way, all tech is biased. It is intended in a certain direction. So not all bias is bad, but bias that distinguishes between people on what we call protected characteristics, your gender, your age, your race, your ethnicity, your religion, your sexual orientation, your gender identity, that's bad. And we see from our research that time and time again, despite genuine efforts to remove the bad bias, it's still in there, for instance, through proxies. And still in there through the proxies, it grows ever more distinctive through the feedback loops. And it's very, very important to tackle these. They constitute one of the biggest concerns we have for the application of artificial intelligence today.
And this game of catch up, is it ever going to end, or is it going to get worse and worse? Is it going to exacerbate into worse and worse situations?
I'm not going to take the question in those terms. It doesn't have to be worse and worse. It can be better and better. AI is the most astonishing potential tool for human thriving that we've seen in our history, I would argue. If it's marshaled and channeled in the right direction with the right levels of care. So we can have an astonishingly good future for human beings through a smart application of artificial intelligence. But we will always be catching up. That's the nature of technology. Is it ever different in any other sector? Things are constantly in evolution. And so the law and the regulator and the oversight, it will never stop moving along as the technology moves. The key here is to avoid any sense of complacency. We have to, for example, in the EU, put in place an AI regulation that's smart and anticipatory for the future, that can already but can already be poised to address future applications that we can't even think of today.
So the EU has begun to play the global technology game. Where would you say the EU is in this game in terms of sophistication, strategy, resources, and vision, especially in comparison to US, Russia, and China?
Yeah, the EU believes in trustworthy AI. And that, by the way, is the only AI that's compatible with respect for human rights. So I'm very proud to play my own small role in my agency, proud to play its role in developing this regulatory framework. And by the way, you've mentioned other parts of the world. I believe in the longer term, the trustworthy AI that the EU approach is championing will ultimately be the more successful one. Because frankly, consumers, users, people, citizens, they're only going to tolerate an AI that they can trust, that they see is oriented to human well-being.
What do you think about the evolving role of algorithms in society and how it affects our ability to make informed decisions?
I think that society isn't adequately aware of the extent to which algorithms are playing vital roles in people's lives. For example, I think there's a low level of awareness of the extent to which the state is using algorithms. There was a scandal last year in one country, in the Netherlands, where social welfare payments were taken back from individuals on the basis, it was ultimately learned, of the discriminatory application of an algorithm, a racist, essentially, action of an algorithm. I don't doubt the whole thing was unintended, but it was a state service which was impacted here. So we need our citizens to wake up to the extent to which algorithms are in play. We need public debates about the extent to which that is or is not acceptable to people on the European streets. And we need also an exposure of that reality to allow people to make complaints if they feel they've been wronged. You won't complain about the decision made by an algorithm where you're not even aware that such a decision was taken that impacted you negatively.
How successful do you think the EU has been in shaping global standards of privacy and data protection?
I think it's been the world leader. The GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, it was a global first. and it may not be perfect. Nothing is, and nothing human-made is perfect. But nevertheless, it's a very serious effort to protect this very important human right of privacy. It's not an absolute right, but nevertheless, we have to protect it very carefully to avoid the abuses of privacy that led to such horrors as, to take the most extreme example, the genocide, the Holocaust here in Europe. So the European leadership there has been very important. Even if it were copied nowhere else, I would applaud it, but it has been copied. It has been taken, it's been adapted locally in many countries around the world. Proof, if any were needed, that it was not an act of folly, but rather a commitment to global values and a pathway towards honouring them.
All right, so the last question is of a personal kind. It is, what would you be doing in your life if not this right now?
Yeah. I've spent so much of my life working in the area of human rights, I would find it really hard to know what I would do otherwise. I think I'd like to be an art dealer. I'd be a very bad art dealer.